What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and word has reached my ears that apparently in that poster that has like all the glass and all that kind of stuff, that Chthon shows up there. And initially I didn't realize it was him, right? Like somebody sent me an image and they were like, this looks like Chthon, right? And then once I looked it up, I realized it's everywhere. People have been talking about it for like the last week. I don't know how I missed it, but yeah, it took me a minute to see it. But when I did, I was like, damn, that kind of does look like Chthon. It also looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon, but it looks like Chthon. And so it was like, damn, all right. So it was one thing when we were like speculating, right? Because Chthon and the Scarlet Witch go hand in hand. Here's a big misconception I do want to correct though. So people always talk about like the House of M Scarlet Witch and how powerful she was and all that kind of stuff. Chthon gave Wanda really the nature of her powers, right? The peak of her abilities, not really the peak, but the ability to like alter reality and things like that. What made Wanda so powerful during the events of House of M was actually something called the Life Force, which basically amplified the powers that she got from Chthon several times over. It's how she was able to wipe basically 98% of the mutant population, or at least take away powers of 98% of the mutant population across the multiverse, because originally it was just a singular universe. But then later on, Beast of the X-Men basically realizes it was across the whole multiverse. As far as I'm aware, Marvel used that to bookend an explanation as to why it is during the events of Old Man Logan, the mutants just never came back. That basically after the X-Men and various mutants were essentially killed off and like the villains conquering the world, that mutants just didn't really emerge anymore, that the Scarlet Witch is the reason why. But regardless, that's something that I felt like clearing up. But here's the thing, even then, right, all right, look. The big question people are gonna have, right? They're gonna say, okay, we got Chthon on one side, right? Chthon on one side, weighing in at however much this guy weighs because he's enormous, versus Chthon weighing in at whatever he weighs, right? Who wins? Oh, Chthon, hands down. Here's the thing, man. Here's the thing about these guys. A really good example of this, there's an old Doctor Strange story from back in the day where Dormammu actually invokes the power of Chthon and refers to him as like the great Chthon, right? Like this great magical being. The amount of power that Chthon has, and that's something that we talked about before here on Geek Culture Explained, right? The amount of power this guy has is absolutely nuts. Now, the big question you have to ask here is that if Chthon is basically the guy in Doctor Strange 2, who's maybe the one manipulating Wanda or whatever the case is, and then there's also somebody like Dormammu, then how do these two tie together? And I still say it's the concept of the Hell Lords kind of being reworked by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, technically, Dormammu's considered a Lord of Chaos. He's like Shumagorath or any of those guys out there, right? He's not really a Hell Lord or anything like that. Technically, Dormammu's a Faltine is really what he is, right? He comes from like the Faltine dimension, basically a dimension of magical energy and so on and so forth. He conquered the Dark Dimension with his sister Umar. They created the Mindless Ones and so on and so forth. He's basically been an enemy of Doctor Strange ever since. Chthon was a demon, or really was more like an elder god who existed on Earth. And the reality here is that when it comes to beings and the kind of power they possess, the dimensions they hail from don't really matter. They don't really have much of a bearing. For example, like Odin is from Asgard. Odin's really, really powerful. Odin would get curb stomped by Franklin Richards, and he's just the son of Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, but he's a universal constant and he can alter reality on a universal level. The Molecule Man Owen Reese can alter reality on a multiversal level, and he was just a guy, right? I mean, he was literally a dude who was performing an experiment, accidentally made a cosmic cube and absorbed half of it into himself, right? So the guy could basically do anything. So just because a person hails from like Earth or an earthly dimension does not mean that they are not powerful. Technically, Chthon is an elder god that originated on Earth. Ultimately, he was defeated by a tomb and then took up refuge in his own dimension, but not before creating the Darkhold and then leaving it on Earth as a way for him to return. And that in and of itself, when it comes to the MCU, that's really what it is about, right? I mean, I love theory crafting. I love coming up with like these crazy and wild and insane ideas, but you guys have, for the most part, been right to a degree, right? The reality is the MCU always just goes with the simplest thing. And the simplest thing here is that Chthon is a demon entity that exists out there that created the Darkhold, and the Darkhold in turn allows a person who uses it to basically become a vessel for Chthon, right? The more they use it, the more Chthon can tap into them. This is doubly so because the history between Wanda and Chthon, they go hand in hand, right? Chthon is as much a energy-based father to Scarlet Witch as Magneto is her biological father, kind of, but not really, depending on what era of comics you're talking about. The important thing here is that it makes the most sense that Chthon would be there. But again, referencing this relationship that could potentially exist between Chthon and Dormammu, how does this work? Well, let's be honest with ourselves. If the motivation of Dormammu in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is to expand the Dark Dimension and to conquer territories, he can't be the only one. He can't be the only one out there just wanting to conquer other realities and take them over, right? It would just seem kind of weird he'd be the only one to do that. So somebody like Chthon could very well exist out there. Now, what the origin of Chthon is, here's the thing. I have a hard time believing that when like Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier was saying like, let's tell Doctor Strange the truth. And Baron Mordo starts talking to him. He's like, once upon a time, there were elder gods who existed on Earth that predate man by billions of years. And then they were just kind of cool and they were exploring magic. But then eventually they all just lost their shit, right? They just went off the rails and started attacking each other. And Chthon was the most powerful. So in order to bring all the chaos to an end, basically Gaia, the spirit of the Earth, banged the Earth's atmosphere, and they ended up creating like Demiurge. And then Demiurge in turn killed all of the elder gods, absorbed them. The ones that didn't get killed, they took off to other dimensions, and then he merged with the sun. Like, I have a hard time believing, because that's the origin. That's the origin in the comics. I have a hard time believing they're gonna do that in Doctor Strange too. It would just seem weird, you know? Like it would just like people would just be like, what? Like, this really is a multiverse of, it's a movie of madness, right? Doctor Strange 2, movie of madness, right? That's right? The plot of madness. That's what it would come across. People would just be like, this is ridiculous. Like, even for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I don't know exactly what his origin is going to be, but I will say this, that in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in terms of Chthon, his relationship with Dormammu, one, it makes the most sense that if Chthon does exist in the MCU, which seemingly he does, and that if Chthon is the source of Scarlet Witch's power, or at the very least, by creating the Darkhold and then the Scarlet Witch taking it and reading it, she's basically allowed herself to become susceptible to being corrupted by Chthon, and that Scarlet Witch is chasing after America Chavez, basically being controlled by Chthon as this kind of earthly avatar, or maybe it's one of those things where she's being forced to do it, right? Like she heard her kids crying or screaming at the end of WandaVision, she takes off, what the hell is it? And then Chthon's standing there and like he's creating an illusion of her kids, but she doesn't know it's an illusion. And he's like, if you want your children back, go get America Chavez for me, bring her to me, and then you can have your kids and you can live happily ever after, or something along those lines. Who knows? Who cares? But whatever it is, she's chasing after America Chavez. Chthon wants America Chavez so that Chthon can escape his own dimension and then start wreaking havoc across the entirety of the universe, or even just the multiverse, whatever the case happens to be. That when you're talking about a guy like that, you are really talking about a being who's just that powerful. The funny thing about Chthon is he can't leave his own dimension. He can't escape his own dimension. It's the caveat to his character. Chthon has always been a person who's been trapped inside his own dimension and needs an earthly host in order to escape. It's the big difference between like Chthon and Dormammu. Dormammu like routinely shows up and just starts right with like Doctor Strange, just starts causing problems, right? Like he does that all the time in Marvel Comics, right? It's just one of those things. But when Chthon shows up, that's when you know things are really starting to pop off. And again, if Chthon is trapped in his own dimension, if he is forcing Wanda to get America Chavez so he can escape, then it would also make sense that either he's trapped in his own realm, he's looking to expand his own realm, because you would have to imagine if someone like America Chavez has the ability to jump from one reality to the next, she's got to have some multiversal equivalent of like cosmic awareness. For those of you guys who don't know what that is, cosmic awareness is a concept that is largely confined to either cosmic entities or beings that are super powerful operating on a cosmic scale. Adam Warlock, Quasar, people like that. People who basically know what's going on in the universe at essentially any point in time. It doesn't mean they can stop whatever's happening. It just simply means they know that it's happening, right? So it's like raising awareness, right? You know, there's a problem there. You know, now it's somebody else's job to fix it. But that's kind of how that's how that cosmic awareness works. With America Chavez, you'd almost have to imagine it's the same thing. She'd have to know where she was going. She's like Nightcrawler from the X-Men teleporting around. She can just jump from one universe to the next. Otherwise, who knows what kind of universe she could end up in. Now that may be part of the mystery, that her powers don't work that way. She doesn't know what universe she's going to, but say for example she does, then someone like Chthon seizing that power of America Chavez, it'd be very, very easy for him to in turn just hop and skip across the multiverse and conquer universes much faster than Dormammu could. The other part of this is that if we wanted to bring Dormammu into this, it could be this kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe equivalent of like the space race, right? Everyone's after America Chavez. Everyone's trying to get the power of America Chavez. And what America Chavez is doing is just fleeing for her life, right? Wanda is the physical avatar, the earthly avatar being used by Chthon to try to get America Chavez. Dormammu's trying to do the same thing, and any other beings who were out there trying to escape their own realm could possibly be doing the same thing. One of the things to know here is that if we leave out the whole idea of Loki and we say like the multiverse existed, except that Loki just kind of set it free, then that could mean that America Chavez has basically been doing this her whole life, right? She's like Sylvie from Loki, right? Just kind of always on the run, always hopping around from one place to the next. This is all America Chavez's life has been for a number of years. And she's constantly been chased by like Dormammu, and she's constantly been chased by Shumagorath and other people like that, right? Maybe that's why Shumagorath appears on Earth in the first place, is because Shumagorath is hunting for America Chavez, and we know America Chavez was at some point in the Sanctum Sanctorum of Doctor Strange. We know that from the trailer. So it's like Shumagorath, and it's like Chthon, and it's like Dormammu. These guys are all just gunning for this girl. And it just happens to be that Scarlet Witch is one of the people who are being used. Who knows? Maybe Scarlet Witch has her own agenda, right? She wants her kids, so she's hunting for America Chavez. Whatever the case is, in terms of circling back around, I guess, to the main point of this video, because we've kind of digressed here a little bit, as far as Chthon goes, in the grand tapestry of people who are powerful, at least borrowing from Marvel Comics and assuming that that kind of translates to the MCU, Chthon's almost near the top. This guy's ridiculously OP on a universal level, right? On a universal level. He's nowhere near like the Living Tribunal, right? Or like the Molecule Man or the One Above All or like the Beyonders or anybody like that. He's nowhere near that level of power. Like the Chaos King would obliterate Chthon, and not even by a little bit. I mean, he would just blah, right? That would be literally the Chaos King, Amatsu Mikabashi. This guy killed basically every god in the multiverse. It was kind of nuts, but that's entirely possible here. So again, I think that having Chthon in the movie would be cool. I think it'd be really, 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 really awesome because it would really tie in well with the nature of Wanda, especially when we're talking about the Darkhold. The biggest issue with the Darkhold, though, is that routinely in the Runaways TV show and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the nature of the Darkhold is that it is fed by basically dark dimension energy. And the ruler of the dark dimension is Dormammu. So how it is you reconcile those two things, I'm not entirely sure. The MCU could just change it, right? They could just be like, actually, that was never the case. It was just powered by Chthon, and it's always been that way. The people in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Runaways, they were just idiots. They had no idea what they were dealing with. They were misinformed, right? It comes by way of like Doctor Strange, Dormammu, whoever. It doesn't really matter. But again, that's kind of the cool thing here, is that there's a lot of possibilities here with Chthon being invoked, presumably, in Doctor Strange 2. If this one little image that we've seen is to be believed. This little shard of glass that we saw in the poster that looks like Chthon, if we are going to take this as gospel truth and run with it, then yeah, things would be really, really fascinating with him in there, because I gotta be honest, man, if the power of Chthon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is anywhere comparable to his power in the comics, no way anybody stands a chance. Not a chance. And I wouldn't be surprised if for all the power that Wanda has, she's only got a sampling of the power that Chthon has, because that's how it works in the comics. She gets this small little fraction of Chthon's power, but if that dude managed to escape his dimension and show up in the main Marvel Universe in his actual real physical form with 100% of his power, everybody would fall. The cosmic entities, Doctor Strange, Galactus, anybody out there would fall, with the exception of the absolute most powerful reality manipulators on a multiversal scale. No one would be able to defeat this guy. So hopefully we see something comparable to that in Doctor Strange 2. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.